rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com address.
Hi, Chuck Guzman. This is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. There is no one present who is desiring to provide public comment, and there were no written public comment messages sent ahead of time.
All right, with no participants in the queue, we will then close the public comment period at this time. Recommended actions. There is one recommended action on our agenda today, and that is for the 2021 through 2026 strategic plan official version for the Board of Directors to approve the attached document as the current official version of the 21-26 strategic plan, which incorporates revisions to the plan previously adopted by the board on June and October of 2024. Do we have a motion?
Busick, so moved.
Geisinger, second.
Thank you. I have Busick as the movement, Geisinger as the second. I would ask Deborah A. Johnson, our General Manager and CEO, and John McKay, Executive Business Partner, to present this item to the committee. Thank you. You are recognized.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman. Greetings to all that are assembled. I'm Deborah Johnson, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer. I am joined by John McKay, the Executive Business Partner. And what we have before you today is a reprint for all intents and purposes of the strategic plan, recognizing what the committee chair introduced as the recommended action. For those by way of background, the Board of Directors adopted the agency strategic plan in August of 2021 at a special board meeting. This strategic plan, it allowed this agency to have more or less a North Star relative to the direction in which the agency had decided to go relative to its vision, its mission, its strategic priorities, as well as success outcomes. During the course of the 4+ years, there's been certain elements that have been modified, keeping in mind that staff have the authority by virtue of the board's previous action to adjust relative to initiatives and things of the like to ensure that the agency was adhering and meeting its strategic priorities in addition to its success outcomes. Recognizing that this body approved modifications to the agency performance scorecard and input received by the Office of the State Auditor, the board acted upon that in October of 2024. Keeping in mind that this body, as it currently is seated, we came back before you in February, providing you with a discussion item, and we are here today to walk through the various elements. I want to reiterate that the strategic plan, in reference to its key components, vision, mission, strategic priorities, and success outcomes remain unchanged. There have been modifications to the agency performance scorecard, which basically align with OSA's recommendations for the financial key indicators. At this juncture, I want to also amplify that this strategic plan includes photographs of the current sitting board, and this will be disseminated to new employees to reflect what has changed since this plan was adopted agency-wide as of August of 2021. With that, I'm going to yield the floor to Mr. McKay to orient all those assembled to the changes that you will see incorporated in this current version, which more or less really amplifies our collective actions to be one RTD. With that, Mr. McKay, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John McKay, Executive Business Partner, and my plan this morning is to just scroll through some of the pages of the current strategic plan as printed. This is the version that that the board members received earlier last week, I believe. This is now reflected in the packet. I'm starting on page 1 here. This does show our new One RTD logo. And I want to give huge thanks to our marketing department and communications and engagement department overall. They've done yeoman's work in putting this together. What this is not is a new policy document. This is reflective of the previous version. There are new narrative elements, there are new graphics and things like that. And I'll show the old strategic plan for comparison's sake. But this, as General Manager and CEO Johnson said, this is reflective of the vision, mission, values, strategic priorities, and success outcomes captured in the first strategic plan printed in August of 2021. This version does incorporate, as I said, new photographs, new narrative elements, and it does now include our strategic initiatives for the 2024-2025 cycle. That's a new element that is, we've revamped that as a staff over the last couple of years. We have done some strategic planning exercises in order to come to the current strategic initiatives for the last two calendar or performance years, rather, that are reflective of staff efforts to improve some of the metrics or improve scores on some of the metrics that we capture in the current agency performance scorecard, which is captured in this document. As General Manager and CEO Johnson said, the scorecard is reflective of the board's changes that were made in June of 2024 and October of 2024. And as she noted, there are 10 new faces on this document as compared to the previous one, so it was about time for a refresh. So I'm just scrolling through bit by bit here. We have now inserted the strategy pyramid. This is something that is used in strategic planning circles to reflect the very top elements of a strategic plan all the way down to how the employees interact with the strategic plan. This lays it out, I think, pretty nicely for people who are new to it. I think this will be very helpful for say, new employees who are coming on board. And I actually saw a class of new RTD employees as I was walking in today. And I think there were about 30 or 40 of them down there. So I look forward to making sure that they get a new copy of this document once approved by this board. Scrolling through further, here, as I noted, some of the narrative elements that we've included. Again, thanks to the communications and engagement folks for putting these together, for reaching out, for gathering some of these great stories that really highlight what the values mean, what the strategic priorities mean. And I'll keep going here. And again, for each strategic priority, there is a series of elements, of vignettes of both customer interactions and employee stories, things like that. And in a moment, we'll get to the scorecard. This is the scorecard as previously seen by the board and approved in October of 2024. This is located currently on the strategic plan website on the RTD website. And all of these elements are reflected there. And in the strategic plan, sorry, let me take that back. In the performance dashboard, also on the RTD website, we have the actual scorecard in each of its elements, and scores associated with those are posted on the website and regularly updated. And again, like I said, these are the strategic initiatives. As compared to the previous version of the strat plan document itself, in the previous version, there were departmental scorecards and tactics in two different separate sections. We've morphed as a staff toward these strategic initiatives. The scorecard itself associated with the strategic initiatives is not included in this because this document, it needs to be a little bit more flexible. Since we've only reprinted this document once over the course of its life, it's important to keep that separate so that those elements can be updated regularly as needed, so that we can capture new, as a staff, capture new metrics and new measures as we're going through the year. And then keeping scrolling through, I won't stop on each of these pages. And at the end of the book, we have some of the factual elements that we included in the previous version of the strat plan, and then explanation of RTD services, financial overview. And this was reflective of some comments we received from both members of the legislature and the accountability committee back in 2020 and 2021. They felt that they needed just a top level view of RTD's budget, and this is a great snapshot of that for elected officials throughout the district. And then some of our high level initiatives, including the comprehensive operational analysis that's coming forth this year, and the facilities and fleet transition plan. And then some of the outreach elements that just to show how RTD does engage with community customers, and how we gather information so that we can improve our strategic plan year over year. And let me briefly switch gears here. I'm going to go back to the original strategic plan. So this is the one adopted by the board in August of 2021. This was a very early cut of this document. There's a slightly updated version of the one that was on the website, but this gives a good overview of what was seen previously. So As I said, 15 board members, 10 of whom have changed since this was first published. The same elements about, ridership and service area, things like that. Vision, mission, values did not change. Strategic priorities, success outcomes did not change. Some of the explanatory elements are changed over here. These are the tactics that I had mentioned. These have been morphed into the strategic initiatives, and those are, as I mentioned, located on the board's website, or on the agency's website rather, on the strategic plan portion of the website. And then scrolling briefly, I'm sorry for giving everybody whiplash, but I'll just keep going. And again, this was the previous version of the scorecard that has been updated to reflect the board's changes. And at the very bottom, see, these are the departmental scorecards that were previously included in the strat plan. That some departments still do maintain these, but that's for their own use as a department. We have moved to the strategic initiative version of this, so the strategic initiatives are reflective of staff's efforts overall rather than by a specific distinct department. And that's it. If there are any questions about either the previous version or the current version, I'm happy to take those as will GM CEO Johnson.
All right, directors, are there any questions or comments at this time? I'll start. I'm looking at the Office of the State Auditor's Report recommendation number 7. It can be found on that report on page 81, where it discusses the implementation of a written policy or bylaw requirement of the RTD management to consistently provide to the board performance scorecard updates or board approved performance updates related to performance metrics established within RTD's board adopted strategic plan or any other board approved or adopted long range plans. So to answer that requirement, most of our metrics that are reflected in here under these 4 key categories, they are on the dashboard, correct? Sorry, it's a bit of a leading question, but I want to get there quickly. The second part of that recommendation was for the board, so executive committee members, because this is bylaw and policy, it would go to your committee, that we needed to outline what changes RTD management can make to the RTD strategic plan or other board approved or adopted plans. So we need to make sure that we are complying with that because we did agree with that recommendation. Approving this updated version is the management of RTD coming to us to seek approval of an updated version of the strategic plan, but we still don't have that policy bylaw in place. So I just want to put that on the record because we did agree to making that change. And the clearing up the role of the board office in this process, including board requests for updates or helping to ensure RTD management provide the board with regularly and timely updates regarding RTD's progress toward achieving strategic priorities. I'm bringing those items up because this is all rolled into the same piece of work, but it is handled in different committees unless we decide to do something different. So Mr. McKay, excuse me, go ahead and respond because you might have something that we need to discuss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will defer to Jack Kroll at the executive manager of the board office, rather, on the second part of your statement there. The first part, I will say that in the board report for the strategic plan, the board report that accompanied the strategic plan this time around, we did delineate between the items that staff is eligible to update and the items that the board must approve before the strategic plan can be updated, which is really the reason we're bringing it before you today, because staff recognizes that changes cannot be made at a high level to the strategic plan without the board's involvement.
Great. Mr. Kroll?
Thank you, Chairman Guzman. So to answer the question of which committee this notion of defining the board's role in long-term strategic planning best fits, it's actually in the performance committee, and you all, with the assistance of the executive office, and adopted a bylaw further clarifying the role of the performance committee in the performance committee and the executive committee considered this in November of last year, and then it was adopted by the board at its December 3rd meeting. And that clearly spells out that the performance committee should be responsible for long-range strategic planning.
Great, thank you. Having all that cleared up, Director Nicholson.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask quickly, maybe you could speak to, and I'll admit when I say this that I have not read a lot of, strategic plans for government agencies before. But how do you see, it didn't seem like there was much of like an analytical section in there. It was more of a presentation of our strategic initiatives, of our, goals. And so I was wondering, is that typically is that not typically, I should say, part of a strategic plan to have something where we would go through and, sort of talk about, here's how these, overarching initiatives, here's how these goals sort of flow into the types of achievable results that we're looking for, and, how everything sort of knits together. Or is this more of a sort of high level 30,000 foot, we're going to present you with the pieces of the strategic plan, but not really dig into the, not the details, but really sort of tying it together in a more formal way, if that makes sense.
Madam CEO.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman. Thank you, Director Nicholson, for the question. So as it relates to a strategic plan specifically for a public transit agency, as you can imagine, there's various elements that ensure that we can deliver our services in the manner in which the taxpayers expect us to with our fiduciary responsibility. Keeping that in mind, Mr. McKay did reference the strategic initiatives and that we have scorecards. Recognizing that we would not go into detail at this level, talking about the mean distance between failure and how that would yield a return on investment relative to service delivery, keeping in mind that there's different components from a tactical level that would yield that. Keeping also in mind that the end result of what we do generally leads to transit utilization, which you may recall, some of you reference as ridership, we talk about them as boardings. There are certain elements, and so when Mr. McKay was talking about the strategic initiative of back to basics, for instance, it's inherently important that we focus on our asset renewal. Keeping in mind that this was a 5-year strategic plan, now we have a year left, that could morph because we could be focused on asset renewals and then in the next year pivot where we're looking at more specifically vehicle procurements to ensure that we are yielding the return on investment by the federal government, whereby we're exceeding the 12-year useful life. And so I'm giving you these specific examples intentionally to amplify my point that the nature of our business would not entail us, would not lend itself to go into specificity relative to what we're actually doing because it changes. But this does not negate the key performance indicators within the critical departments within the organization that yield to a 1 RTD approach.
Director Nichols.
I've been well trained to wait. I appreciate that. That was my primary question. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Larson, your hand was up next.
Sure, thank you, Chair Guzman. I just wanted to ask, and I've been probably told this before, but when will we start working on the next strategic plan since we are in the last year of this one?
Madam CEO.
Yes, thank you very kindly, Chair Guzman, and thank you, Director Larson, for the question. For all intents and purposes, from a staff perspective, we're working on, in the third quarter, putting together a scope where we'll go forward relative to leveraging a solicitation to seek assistance in doing that. Keeping in mind that this is a joint effort with the board. If the board elected to do something otherwise, and the staff would be agile to that, but for all intents and purposes, we would anticipate commencing with this work in the very near term.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yep, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Well, I will just give an opinion on this. Thank you for making it clear and concise, pulling a large amount of information back into a more digestible format. explaining what our strategic priorities look like from different points of view throughout the agency, not just from the high level, is helpful in explaining what we're doing. I do like that it is not prescriptive in the manner that the scorecards can be for a departmental valuation, but does provide some room to maneuver in there, and so I'm looking forward to taking this vote, but also looking forward to kind of finishing out this strategic plan and being able to implement a new one going forward. So thank you for the work on it. I think it looks pretty sharp. All right. If there is nothing else, one last chance. Nope. Let's take a vote. Are there any no votes on this recommended action? Seeing none, that passes with 7 ayes, 0 noes, and 0 absent. We will send that up to the board for unanimous consent. All right. Next, there's a discussion item on the agenda for the General Manager and CEO Annual Performance Assessment Overview. We need to get our ducks in a row, as we always do. And our performance committee has done a lot of work to create and generate this process, both with and collaboratively through advice from the CEO, Deborah Johnson, who is currently in that position. I would like to remind the committee members that our process should be considered in a manner that is relative to the position of general manager and CEO. And we distinctly did not make this a personal issue. It's not individual to Deborah. This is supposed to be a sustainable and repeatable process that we can use going forward. And we established it last year and have been working to perfect it. So although it is not perfect, we are not going to let that be the enemy of the good. And we need to talk about what timelines look like and what's coming up. So let's go ahead and forward to the next slide. For your edification, there's a large outline on here of documents and work that has been done prior to today that we use for looking at all of this information. We can go to the next slide. Go ahead and forward. The general manager compensation philosophy that the board adopted in September of 2023 gives these very specific ideas that we need to look at to demonstrate internal equity, fairness, transparency, while being externally market competitive and aligning to the 50th percentile of pay for a person in the role of a general manager or CEO in this area. The idea that we need to be able to adapt nimbly to changing external, for example, labor markets and internal circumstances, i.e. fiscal restraints within the agency, is part of our whole compensation philosophy. Board members should be aware of that. Thank you. The general manager, CEO, go ahead and forward it to the next one. Compensation range. When Deborah Johnson entered into the general manager CEO 5-year employment agreement in September of 2020, we set forth some expectations regarding compensation and benefits and a program by which the board and in consultation with Ms. Johnson should establish performance goals, metrics, annually evaluate the general manager CEO performance. That does not mean on a calendar year necessarily, but that is what we are doing right now. And utilizing a framework for determining future incentive awards and increases to base salary subject to her meeting or exceeding these goals. Go ahead and forward. In the third amendment, we did do work on compensation benchmarking and analysis. The board used this information in consultation with general manager CEO to determine her compensation for performance periods beginning January of 2023 going forward. Following a competitive solicitation, Gallagher Benefit Services selected to conduct a comprehensive and systematic benchmarking analysis of GM CEO total compensation package, which includes both external market-based factors and internal equity considerations to ensure competitiveness in pay practices. Well, what does that mean? We're looking at what happens externally to RTD, but also looking at how our pay structure is throughout the agency and how that aligns. The analysis informed the board of decisions for compensation in the position for the general manager CEO relative to market considerations. And we received study results in November of 2022 and again in October of 2023. The committee members of the performance committee members considered the recommendation of the general manager CEO base salary range based on the full market data of comparable organizations. Next slide. All right, so in the highlighted area on the right of your screen, you will see that our compensation range currently is a minimum of 292,600. To start, the midpoint is 402,325, and the maximum is 512,050. I think just understanding that that's the band within we're working currently, it is important to know that. General Performance Assessment Framework, February 15th, we reached a consensus that process for evaluating general manager and the agency could be enhanced. Great, no surprises. We worked on what we would do as committee members through the 21-26 strategic plan that was adopted in 2021 and looked at the employment agreement contract entered into in September of 2020 and the fourth agreement that was agreed to on October 26, 2022. Also bringing into that the compensation study report completed by Gallagher in 2022. So we have agreed to explore possible strategies and opportunities to enhance this process for evaluating our general manager CEO performance. Go ahead and go to the next one. This is the framework that we currently use. Our agency performance metrics, the data that Director Nicholson was referring to, should always feed back into and support short-term goals. Working backwards, those short-term goals should always support the agency values and the core base job functions of the general manager CEO. The board of directors has accountability here to review all of this work, and the general manager has the accountability of making sure that all of this is aligned in the work that they are doing. So it's a cyclical, supportable, sustainable, and repeatable performance framework. Go ahead to the next slide. We adopted the 7th Amendment in 2024 to the General Manager CEO's agreement, in which we wanted to retain an external consultant to conduct current compensation analysis that was to be done no later than October 31st of 2024. And we took appropriate action consistent with the compensation philosophy from the board that was adopted in 2023. Next slide, please. Per the 7th Amendment, this is where we're at right now. The review of the 2022 total compensation study findings and recommendations needed to be completed. The applicability of the general manager CEO compensation philosophy principles must be considered. And then we also need to contemplate or consider any information provided by general manager and CEO and consultation with her prior to the board taking any action. The board was not required by this current 7th Amendment that we are working under right now to adopt any adjusted base salary or other compensation increase, although we did agree to potentially review it. And I am confident, as well as the vice chair of this committee, that that is something that we could have a conversation with Chief People Officer Pelegi. I believe the last time she did this type of analysis for us was 0.01% off. Is that correct? I see the head nod from Deborah Johnson. Thank you very much, Madam CEO. Her certifications and qualifications exceed in this area, and so I don't see a need to do a further comprehensive study, but we can certainly take a look at what adjusted salary bands might look like. I don't believe that we are that far off. Go ahead and forward to the next slide, please. This is the result of the RKL. I'm sorry. Yes. In analyzing the responses, our contractor, RKL Virtual Management, found that the general manager CEO compensation was at market in 5 areas, lagging in 2, and above market in 1 area. That full report is available to directors at their request. If you have not seen it, it's worth the read. Next slide, please. So, in January of 2024, the board approved the 2024 General Manager CEO Performance Assessment Framework. It was developed in conversations among current and immediate past board chairs, the Performance Committee, the Executive Committee, and the Chief People Officer, along with the General Manager and CEO. Done collaboratively together, we reached consensus in our conversations to retain an external consultant to work with the General Manager, CEO, and the Performance Committee. that resulted in a 360 evaluation and also assisted the board in the development and execution of a final performance assessment framework and process that we can use repeatedly with some updates every year. In July 9th of 24, RTD entered into an agreement with RKL, developed the 360, and assisted the board with the general manager CEO final performance assessment. Next. I'm bringing this up because this is how we worked last year and it was part of our timeline. We did the key objectives for the 360 assessment were to identify assessment raters, identify key assessment components, everything listed here, develop a performance assessment tool, a list of questions, and then distribute the results to the board for analyzation and further reporting. Go ahead to the next slide. Both the 360 and the self-evaluation from the general manager CEO were tied to the process of the full board assessment. However, the board did not receive the 360 assessment tool prior to our evaluation of the general manager CEO, and the 360 assessment tool was not a weighted part of the general manager's evaluation. Her self-evaluation was far more important to us. It's okay, that's fine. The proposed approach that we took made sure that we did the interview performance with the committee directors, and there were 3 different committee directors last year, interviewed the general manager on goals, reviewed our job description for the general manager CEO position and organizational values and goals, narrowing that down, and then getting to the develop assessment questions section on this to achieve the proper questions for that 360 review. Go ahead and go forward. The identifying raters, we had 5 direct reports to this general manager CEO, 3 board directors, and 4 peers and stakeholders externally to the agency to provide a full array of feedback that could be used by the general manager CEO for their purposes, information and edification, to challenge their perception on their work or to confirm that they are doing the right work. Go ahead to the next slide, please. The general performance assessment tool was completed. Board of directors received it. We encompassed quantitative rating for our assessment tool. We encompassed both quantitative ratings and qualitative feedback, highlighted strengths as well as constructive critiques. RKL did compile our data. They brought back some trends, strengths, and areas for improvement. I believe, Jack, this was presented to the committee in September of 24. Is that correct?
Chair Guzman, I'm not aware of when it was presented, just solely because it was likely presented within the confines of an executive session, but I'm sure it was shared at some point in the fall with the board. GM CEO Johnson may have a better recollection of the time frame there.
Go ahead.
If I may. So yes, this was in the November timeframe, and it was an executive session because this wasn't completed until October of 2024, and I submitted my self-assessment in early November.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at timelines for those of you that have the executive privilege, it may be worth going and taking a peek at that. Let's go ahead and forward to the next slide. Generally speaking, and this is public information already, this was the result of the entire annual performance assessment. This is what is external. We graded on core and base job performance, short-term goals, and then the totals of the number of raters, all the fun math to get the results, resulting in a score, points received, and then max possible points so that we get to the right amounts. We also needed to do the pay for performance table. The pay for performance table was agreed to at the beginning of the year when we approved this year's short-term goals. So there will need to be some adjustment in terms of the slide. This is not reflective of what the current year is, only because this is what was done last year and that has changed. I'm going to pause here for just a moment. The performance assessment summary results section that you see here has core and base job performance and short-term goals. There will be a 3rd section added in here, which is agency values. Those each have a weighted percentage. And so Vice Chair Guchenritter and I have agreed that we will look towards the performance assessment and work with necessary subject matter experts on updating the way that we are presenting our performance assessment to all of you. You will have an opportunity to opine, but we're going to get that work done first. That's a big chunk of what we needed to try and figure out at the beginning of the year, and now we have to reflect the assessment tool to achieve what we had set forth as goals and relative to the assessment that has been approved by this body. Go ahead and forward. Again. For your edification, pull your calendars out. This is what you need to know is going on. We're going to hit a pinch point, I believe, in this committee around June as we get a download of information from a working group with Director Larson and First Vice Chair O'Keefe about potential changes to how we develop goals with our CEO going forward. And they're going to bring us some recommendations. So June will be a key month to pay attention to. It's not listed here, but I just found out about that after our conversation, so I'm highlighting that. What we can look forward here to is that we will have quarterly dialogues with Deborah. We will spend the performance committee's time speaking directly to her about where we are at with respect to the goals for the current year. Agency metrics, key performance indicators that support that information, and generally entering into a conversation with our employee about how things are going in the state of where we're at in the current work. Through October and November, we would expect that our general manager CEO is developing a self-assessment to be presented to the committee and then to the board fully. In November, we will do the board assessment as directors. And I'm going to pause there. Again, Director Gutschenritter, my vice chair on this committee, and I will work on the assessment, get feedback from all of you ahead of time so that it doesn't come to you as a surprise of what we're looking at or how we're doing that evaluation. In November, we will have the year-end performance dialogue that typically happens under executive session as it is a personnel matter. And then in December, we will move forward a recommendation to the board for the adoption of the current assessment of work. I want everybody to be aligned around that because those are going to be critical meetings. And if you've been on this committee before, you know sometimes it gets a little bit hectic, but if we're looking forward and planning it out, we know when we need to be ready for them. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Framework components that we need to consider. We need to look at the point distribution for core-based job performance, demonstration of agency values, and the attainment of short-term goals. And then how those are associated to the adjusted base salary percentage increase. If we fail to do this work, if we do not meet our deadlines, then Ms. Johnson shall be evaluated and compensated based on the criteria of the prior performance period. We already approved these goals for 2025, so now we just have to finish doing the evaluation work. But we do need to make adjustments for the 3 areas that will have an impact on the adjusted base salary percentage increase potential by adjusting and aligning our tool to be able to do that. Go ahead to the next slide. Here's an idea of what you can look forward to. These are current and in line with what we have approved since January of this year. 10 points for the alignment with agency values, 40 points for the core and base job performance, and 50 points weighting for the short-term goals. Clearly, we wanted to emphasize the work towards the short-term goals, and so that's 50% of the total weighting here. And we are giving values to the other core pieces of the job that we would expect of any of us. So we're going to look at all of that comprehensively. Does not meet expectations would be a point range of 0 to 54 points at the end of this, given the current guidelines and the discussion and approval of the framework on doing adjusted base salary. That would equate to a 1% to 2.99% adjusted base salary increase. It meets expectation would exceed 55 points to 80 points, and that would be a 3% to 5.99% adjusted base salary increase, and exceed expectations would be 81 points to the full 100 and 6 to 7%. That is in the contract agreement that we are currently under. Next slide, please. We have completed our March one-on-one quarterly performance dialogue with Deborah. The next one is scheduled for June. There was another item on the calendar for that day along with that conversation. We are going to separate that out. Expect to get polled for a second meeting in June to be able to quickly deal with that. The other matter is important, but not as important as working and taking the time for our employee. This is part of the agreement that is outlined in the current amendment to Deborah's contract for the general manager CEO position to ensure that we have quarterly communication regarding where we're at and how she is doing as our employee, any problems that she is having that this body can address, and any obstacles that we face in terms of working with her to get the work done. Next slide, please. General manager will provide us with a self-assessment. It is detailing her performance over the review period. We would expect to see from that both challenges, obstacles, and successes that are presented to us. And it is a critical component of the overall annual performance assessment, as if there is confusion by a director or something that might be misunderstood as relevant to achieving goals or where challenges lied, that we can take that into consideration when we as individual directors give our score and assessment. Go ahead to the next slide, please. The board will then distribute the performance assessment tool to all directors. We're going to have some hard deadlines on this. If you do not make the deadline, I'm sorry, you're not going to be included in the assessment. So we got to keep an eye on that and help each other be accountable to making sure that this is done. Time is of the essence by the time we get to November. Individual director ratings are tabulated to produce a final assessment score. That would be from all of the directors who have turned their work in on time, and it will utilize both quantitative ratings and qualitative feedback. You'll give a score number that we can tabulate, and you will also give some description that would be used for Deborah directly for her work as the general manager CEO. These ratings and feedback are not anonymous. They are attached to your names. Be aware of that. Professional courtesy, decorum, and responsible communication is expected by every member of this body. And as we are working in a personnel matter, it is expected that that is the approach that we take. Please forward to the next slide. Directors and the general manager will have an executive session to have a two-way constructive annual performance dialogue, and we will be afforded a short window to review and revise the initial assessment scores if warranted. Jack, I saw your hand pop up. What's up?
I just wanted to clarify that while your names would be attached to the feedback received, the feedback would stay confidential. The only thing that gets published in this process is the overall assessment rating and the corresponding merit increase, if any, that the board and the GM and CEO agree upon.
Externally to the public.
Correct.
But internally, when we are having our one-on-one dialogues, for the purpose of clarification, we have agreed with the general manager CEO's recommendation that we do not remove our names from feedback to her directly. That way, if there is a need for follow-up or further discussion around some piece of information that is provided, she is able to follow up with each of us with respect to our comments and feedback. Madam CEO?
Yes, thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman. And further to that point, having been in a space where I manage staff, it would be highly unlikely that it would be anonymous, recognizing that this collective body as individuals and then in some are providing me with feedback as it relates to my performance. And that would not really be meaningful if I had no idea where it came from, as I cannot course correct. Thank you.
Great. I think it's always good to have that conversation sooner rather than later. That way everybody is of the same understanding. All right. Couple of other things in there, but nothing too major. We've covered most of this. And then finally, I just want to bring up that last slide, which is next steps. Updated 2025 assessment performance tool. As I said, we need to look at values, core job duties, and short-term goals. We also need to refresh the rater scoring guide and just have that published and ready to go. So as I said, Vice Chair Guchen Ritter, I don't have the full screen in front of me, sorry, but he and I are going to be working on this together. We will likely engage just to make sure that we are both compliant in terms of the contract with our General Counsel, Melanie Schneider, and with our Chief People Officer, Charlene Pelleggi, to ensure that we have the language correct, that we have the format correct, that we are asking proper questions that delineate the process, and we will look to you as members of this committee for feedback once that work is done. We have not begun that process yet, so I don't have answers in regards to what that may look like, but we are going to proceed forward. Director Larson.
Thanks, Chair Guzman. I just wanted to ask you and anybody who might know, why did we decide to align to the 50th percentile for the compensation versus possibly paying above market?
So I would suggest you review the compensation philosophy that the board passed. It delineates all of the responsibility of the board. It gives us room to move up or down, depending on the situation that we have at hand, or to stay steady at the helm. One of the issues that we face is a top level. We only have so much money, and we have to be able to make that work for the whole agency, not just one single employee, because the funds that we receive from sales and use tax are what run this agency. And then you don't want to go too low, because then you cannot attract new talent. You cannot retain good talent, and you cannot pay for the achievement performance if somebody is exceedingly good at their job, if you have everything up at the higher end. But the compensation philosophy that this board approved guides the direction of that. And I saw Charlene Pelleggi pop up. Did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Guzman. The decision around the 50th percentile was purely made by the board and the Performance Committee. What I would flag, Performance Committee recommended to the board, is that it aligns with how we have our compensation set up for our non-represented staff. So I can't speak to why the board decided on the 50th percentile, but I did want to give that data point that all non-represented compensation is targeted at the 50th percentile.
So could we, I mean, if we wanted to, is there any reason why we couldn't say these positions should be targeted at a higher percentage and these other ones can be at the 50th percentile or something like that?
I think we absolutely could. The only major caution that I would give there is that we do have a finite amount of capital to spend on employment payments, and total compensation is not just a salary figure. There's also the perquisite part of it, the healthcare, the other benefits that are given that we need to be aware of, including paid time off and vacation, other things like that. CFO Pelleggi, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add that there were recommendations in the 2010 performance audit that was done by the state auditor that also called for alignment between the general manager and CEO's compensation and contract with other non-represented employees. Doesn't mean that it has to be exact, but they were best practice was that to have it. So the intent was, as I understand it in the document, to ensure that you did not have as significant a spread from a GM and CEO perspective relative to all other non-represented. That was a recommendation in that audit, but again, I'm just giving that detail. The decision would be key item in there is to be competitive in the compensation philosophy. So of course it does. That is a compensation philosophy only for the GM and CEO role, which therefore does mean that the board does have purview to make changes if it felt necessary.
And I'm going to phone a friend also. Director Catlin, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on here? A lot of this work was done, and I'm trying to reach back in memory because I was prepared for something else, but maybe you have something to add.
No, no, Chair Guzman. CPO Pelleggi pretty much highlighted what I recall.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Are we comfortable proceeding with Vice Chair Guchenritter and I working on the assessment tool and updating it for the new goals? And does anybody have any preliminary feedback about timelines, or do we feel comfortable we can complete this work correctly? And I'm just kind of looking for a head nod or anything. All right, looks like I'm getting the thumbs up and some head nods. All right, Madam CEO, anything to add from your perspective? I want this to be a collaborative process, but some of this work, as we have discussed, just belongs to us getting our assessment tool in order and updated for the current year. So if you have anything to add, I would invite you to the conversation.
Thank you, Committee Chair Guzman. At this juncture, I don't have anything to add. Just wanted to iterate that, as you indicated, it is a collective effort once we go down the path of working in partnership, but with the assessment tool, quite naturally, you all will opine and advise accordingly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Then that concludes our discussion item today. Are there any other matters to discuss from committee members? Going once, going twice. All right, we'll close other matters. Next meeting date will be May 12th, 2025. We are scheduled to be holding discussions on the current GEM CEO assessment form that is developed. By then, hopefully we will have everything done. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being flexible and moving the meeting this month. It was so close to the end of the last board meeting. There was not time to complete everything for our committee work. So I appreciate that. Just a deep thank you to all of you for working with us. And seeing no other discussion, the meeting is now adjourned at 9:26 a.m. Thank you. Have a good day.